I hereby open the Kandiyohi County Board of Commissioners Broadband Work Session. And welcome, everyone. And before we start, I just want to share that we're going to cut this short then about 15 minutes to 10 for our next board meeting. So we have to kind of finish up in 45 minutes. And this is mainly a work session that we're going to be listening to, learning more, asking questions. We will not be voting on anything or no motions during this board meeting. So, and at this point, I want to thank Mr. Kleindahl for taking the extra time to put together this work session and the agenda, and much appreciated. And I'd like to ask you if you would just proceed, Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, members of the public who are watching, and members in the audience here today. Wanted to put together a work session today on broadband. As you know, a lot of conversations are taking place about broadband. You know that Kandiyohi County has been actively seeking and trying to improve broadband for the citizens of Kandiyohi County. It's been something we've worked on for over 20 years. I believe there's people that are on the broadband committee that have been on there from day one or close to it. And this is an ongoing issue, and it just seems like it's a task that we constantly are struggling to fix. What the intent of this work session today is to have a formal session to bring everybody up to speed where we at with broadband. We have a strong broadband committee. They do an excellent job, very committed, dedicated people. When you attend one of the meetings, people are there. You don't have to worry about quorums and stuff because people are showing up. We know how important it is to get broadband out when we need the citizens' support to do that. This last year, we had did a campaign asking people to take the broadband speed test. We did a lot of advertising to get that accomplished, and again, we achieved some of that, but we don't have the numbers that we were hoping for. I think if you look across the state, we're not even in the top 5 for the speed test, and we need to know what your speed is out in rural areas. And so I'm asking you to go and take the speed test. If you've taken it, take it again. All I do is average it out. It's important for us to know where the underserved and unserved areas are. And so I'm asking you to do that. I'm asking you to participate, write letters, send them to Connie Schmull at the EDC. Do your part. Tell the state of Minnesota why broadband is needed in your home. Why is it needed in your business at home? What will happen if you do not have the broadband? What effect does it have on you economically? So those are the things we want to try to ask or talk about today. Again, the whole intent is for you to be brought up to speed. So when we get the federal American Rescue dollars, hopefully we can use some of those dollars for broadband. And we're ready to hit the ground running. As leaders, you are the ones that help dictate where those dollars will be going. And we want to be ready. And so today we're at the starting blocks. We're putting your foot on the starting blocks on the race, and we're going to kick it off. In 2016, we did a broadband feasibility study. To try to figure out where the weaknesses were in Kandiyohi County. That study is already, almost going on 5 years old, and so as we continue to look at it, we'll probably have to do updated studies in certain areas. The trouble with doing studies, you can't do them too far in advance because they quickly become outdated, and so we'll be doing studies as time warrants. Right now, the EDC and the broadband committee is looking at 4 townships, 3 townships for sure to look at for some funding for broadband from Federated. Connie will be talking about that. As you know, we were really close in 2017 to cover a large section of Kandiyohi County with a provider that just did not work out because we believe had to do with the first right of refusal with the provider there. And so we want to make sure that doesn't happen again, and we're taking a better stance and posturing to handle that. In your board packets, I put some background. I'm not going to go into those today, But right now, Kandiyohi County ranks 48 out of 87 for access of 100 download and 20 megabytes upload. So those are important numbers, and Connie and the team behind me will give you that. To give you an update, this is kind of a map. If you look at which I would call the red areas, is unserved. The light blue is underserved. You can see in Kandiyohi County, there's a lot. There's a lot out there. We have a lot of work to do. And the challenges that we face, because a lot of those areas are rural areas. I think one of the providers that we're looking at, I don't know if he told Raleigh or Roger that we have more cows than we have people in some of those areas. But that doesn't mean those people that live in those areas don't need broadband and don't need services. And so our job, our goal is hit the last mile, not the first mile. We want that, take the steps to make sure we get right to their homes and make sure that it takes place. So Connie Small is going to come up from the EDC. She's got a group of other people that she'll introduce and how they're going to present. So Connie, come on up. I'll do my sanitizing.
For sure, there's more turkeys than people out there.
Yeah, and other animals as well. Good morning, Connie.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. I'm Connie Schmal with the Economic Development Commission, and I facilitate the EDC's Broadband and Advanced Technology Committee. Here with me is the Chair of that committee, Mark Boyschen, and the Vice Chair, Michelle Moratsky, and they will be helping with this presentation as well. So you can see my PowerPoint. I have sent some information ahead of time. I hope you had a chance to read through that document. We'll be talking about some things in that document, but some things we won't, so I hope you had a chance to read that. I also want to say, well, I'll go over the history. We are going to talk about why broadband. And I'm going to read to you from what's called the Broadband Communities magazine. It's a nationwide magazine. It's an organization that puts this out once a month. It's free. I encourage you to go online and sign up for it. You can get it digital or you can get it in paper copy. But this is just a broad one that they did about fiber broadband. And it talks about why broadband. And I'm first going to talk about telehealth, how important it is for telehealth. Telehealth is making its way into homes and office. Reliable, high-speed internet connections combined with secure video conferencing systems and networked health monitoring devices allow patients to receive healthcare services from home or from the workplace. And that is pretty new here in Kandiyohi County. Our own hospital has it. Their frustration is they can't work with people in the rural area. They can't do telehealth because they don't have adequate broadband. For education, high-speed broadband is a key issue to closing the gap in education. Who doesn't know how important it was during the pandemic when kids were learning from home? It's a way to get a better return on taxpayers' investments. Today's best connected schools demonstrate how broadband enhances students' educational opportunities. Though nearly all schools now have internet access and 97% are connected to fiber, not all have access to sufficient broadband. It's important for smart cities and smart farms. Broadband applications collect vast quantities of real-time data from sensors or other devices. They transmit it to centralized computers for analysis and sometimes take action based on the results of what they get. Sensors are often connected wirelessly, especially if they are attached to movable objects like tractors, like irrigation systems. They are real-time data collection. They upload a large amount of data sets, but it depends on dense fiber networks. They can't upload some of the currents we have in our rural areas. Broadband is equally important to remote areas. Energy companies monitor wind turbines. They check the status of oil wells and tanks. They monitor power generation equipment. Sensors in barns and chicken coops and dairy barns monitor temperature and humidity and close curtains or turn on fans or water pumps if animals are likely to be in distress. Most important, broadband allows farmers to practice precision agriculture. Sensors in the fields and on the tractors collect data again, but they have to have good fiber broadband connections in order to upload that data. and get real-time response on what they need to do in their farms. Broadband affects property values. Recent studies continue to show that access to high-quality broadband boosts property values and contributes to economic vitality. Some studies show it increases values by 3.1%, or an average value of $5,437. That's enough to put in a fireplace or maybe a half bathroom or even part of a swimming pool outside. So homes that have access to gigabyte per speed are shown to have up to a 7% increase in their property values, and that's especially attractive to young families. How will the fiber network help our local economy with economic growth? Fiber connectivity encourages business to stay. It helps businesses grow, and it become more productive, attracts new businesses, particularly in high-tech industries. Fiber to the home supports home-based startup businesses and helps workers telecommute. We know how important that was, again, due to the pandemic. In fact, many startup businesses happened during the pandemic, and home-based businesses, and people are now going to work at home more than they ever have in the past. Fiber connections permit local healthcare providers to call upon specialists and regional centers, and if an unprepared workforce is a hindrance to expansion, fiber connectivity can enable cost-effective distance learning. Fiber to the home is the only component of an overall economic development strategy, but it's not the only one, but it's a vitally important one. So broadband is important. We need it here in Kandiyohi County and the rural areas just as much as in the cities. I'll talk a little bit about the history. Larry said we've been doing this for a long time, but actually broadband discussions in Kandiyohi County have been happening for over 20 years. They started in 1998 after the Federal Communications started up, and they did the Telecommunications Act. They were called CandyLink in 1998 when they first started, and their mission is down below. Well, that's the mission of the EDC's Broadband Advanced Technology Committee down below. But the BRE committee of the EDC decided to break off and start the Broadband Committee in 2005. And I have to acknowledge Jean, who's in here. She was a big part of that in the beginning. I just took over after Jean left, so broadband was her baby to start out with. And then Vision 2040 got involved in broadband issues as well. The mission of our Broadband Committee at this time is to expand a robust, high-speed broadband network utilizing fiber to the premise where possible and a mix of other communication technologies where fiber is not possible. And that is so we can secure high-speed broadband access to every home, farm, and business in Kandiyohi County. And as Larry talked about, we did make an attempt in 2016 and 2017. We did a county-wide feasibility study. We contacted Blandon. They paid for half of that study, and Kandiyohi County approved and paid for the other half of that study. It included all 24 townships. At that time, the cost to do broadband where it wasn't already high speed was $66 million. I'm sure the cost has gone up since then. A lot of things have happened since then. We did pull in CTC, Consolidated Telecommunications Commission, as our partner. We did write a grant application together. We had over 70 letters of support, and we had them from every sector in the area, not just the area where the broadband was going, but the services that want to serve those areas and need broadband to do so. We did marketing efforts after the grant application was awarded $5 million on a $10 million project. We did mega marketing efforts. These two went door to door many nights after work. So did Raleigh. He did a lot of door-to-door work. Roger did some too, Aaron did some, and I did a bunch too. We thought it was going well. We got all they asked for and 50% of the signups. Then they wanted $25 down on each of the 50%. So we went out again and finished up and got nearly the $25 from all 50% when they pulled the project. TDS had rolled out some plans in the meantime and was marketing as well, trying to get people to sign up for their services. So it was pulled. That project was not successful. We were devastated for a while, as you saw in the letter I sent you earlier. But we're back at it. Before I talk about our current projects, I'm going to have Michelle come up and talk about why fiber is the gold standard and why it's so important to work with fiber anytime we can.
Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning, Commissioner. All commissioners, thank you for having us. I'm Michelle Moratsky, and I work for the Mid-Minnesota Development Commission. I started with the Broadband Committee when I was at Wilbur Municipal Utilities. Have a little bit of a passion for broadband. I've had good fiber. I come from the western part of the state where they've had great fiber internet for about 20 years. And a little longer, I think. So there are some great things that have been done over there that I really believe that Kandiyohi County should really move us up from that middle position in the state to much higher. One of the things we wanted to go over with you is the why fiber and some of the other technologies that are out there. Broadband is a very broad term, and it's used interchangeably for different types of technologies. The first thing, and there are a lot of words on here, so I don't plan to just read off of there. Fiber to the home or premise, that is, so fiber in and of itself, I presume that you all understand that is light, that it's basically moving at the speed of light. And the speeds are upload and downloads up to 1 gigabyte per second. That is the capability of fiber at this time. And it is a direct connection from the central office to the house or the property. So what happens is the fiber connection comes right up to the property, and then a box is installed, electronics put in it, it's right in your house. A similar piece is fiber to the node, and that is just, it's a little bit less expensive. You run fiber to a node or a pedestal, and then you use the existing copper lines to go in. You do lose some speed with fiber to the node just because you are hitting that copper then, but it is still faster than your traditional DSL. Just something to keep in mind also, and Connie will get back into that with the project that we're working on with Federated. Our conversations have been they only do fiber to the home or premise. They don't even do fiber to the node anymore. It's a superior product, and people have been much happier with that. The DSL, you've maybe heard that over the years. That's been around for a long time. That is delivered through your copper telephone lines. Your speeds are not symmetrical. So with fiber, your upload and download speeds are going to be symmetrical. They'll be the same. With DSL, you're going to have that where you hear like the 25.3 or the different words like that. That's not symmetrical speed. Your upload is 25 to 500 megabits per second. Your download speeds are 5 to 30 megabits per second. Wireless, you hear a lot about wireless. That has come in, especially through the pandemic. It has been extremely helpful to have hotspots. And that's where the wireless comes in. It's a fixed wireless is a solution. I don't personally think it's the end solution, but it is a solution where underground deployment is inaccessible or it's not economically feasible. You know, you have some areas, Minnesota or out here, we're pretty flat, but you get up north, maybe you have more hills, more trees, rocks, things like that, that you just can't bore through. It's not economically feasible. So wireless has a very good place in those situations. The speeds do vary. They're not symmetrical, and they tend to be slower than fiber and DSL as well. And that can also be impacted by any number of users, as can DSL. So, you know, some of you have maybe gotten home at 5:30 and you can't sit down and maybe watch your favorite show or read your newspaper because everyone in the neighborhood is on the internet. With fiber, you don't get that. That doesn't happen. You can watch as much TV as you want. You can browse as many newspapers. You can jump on for a medical visit. You can jump on, maybe you're taking a course for some continuing education. You can jump on and do that, and nothing is going to get in your way of it with fiber. Back to wireless, it does rely on your clear line of sight, and it can be impacted by adverse weather. On the next set of technologies, these are just considered other technologies, things that have been around for a while. Some have been around a while. Others are emerging. One of those is your cable modem. That's your coax cable, like your TV, coming in through there, slower speeds. You also have a broadband over power line. That is emerging, not widely used. One article I read said the companies that had it in 2016 no longer have it. So it hasn't been a real one to really take hold. Satellite. So that, again, like wireless, you're dependent on your weather conditions and your line of sight there, and also slower speeds. And then the one that is everyone's favorite to talk about is Starlink. Lots of airtime on Starlink with Elon Musk's venture. He currently has 1,100 satellites in operation. I believe the number he wants to get up to 12,000. Even with 12,000, that's only 485,000 customers or people on it. So that's going to be interesting to see how they do that. It could reach, again, like wireless, it may have a place. It could reach some hard to reach locations as well. And so far in the beta testing, they only have 80 megabits per second download and 30 megabits per second upload. There are outage capacity and congestion concerns from trade groups for that technology. Any questions about any of that information?
Interesting that last night in a discussion with Russ Bennett, Starlink came up, and he seems to think it's the cat's meow. So outages on Starlink, is that because of the function? Is it because it's still experimental, or?
With Starlink?
Yeah.
Starlink outages, not having any data to back that up, I would say that's a good guess, that it's in beta testing. They're working the bugs out.
Okay.
Mr. Emdek, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thanks for your presentation. So you brought up Starlink and SpaceX, and I think they had a satellite crash last week as they tried to launch one. We get a lot of response from sometimes legislators, sometimes other advocates who say, well, that's the real future. Broadband, it's a lot cheaper than fiber. That's the real future. And I get frustrated with that because back when my dad was a beginning farmer and the county agent would come out and say, well, you ought to move to a 2-row chopper versus a 1-row chopper, they could have argued that, why don't you wait till there's a 10-row chopper and then make the investment at that point? I mean, how do you respond to particularly policymakers that want to advocate for SpaceX, but it's who knows when it'll be available and what the quality will be when it is?
So my initial two thoughts on that are, number one, if we're comparing fiber versus a satellite technology like Starlink, first of all, fiber has been around for 25 years, 40 years. Actually, it was initially founded in the 70s. So it's been around for a very long time, and it's starting to get more widely used. It is reliable. It has been proven to be reliable. And barring, every so often you might hear of a fiber cut. So then that will impact it. One of the things is the provider you work with. The provider you work with, as long as they are responsive, which the one that we are working with currently has a track record, and they are proven to be very reliable, and they keep those outages to a minimum. So that's the first thing, is that fiber is proven. And Starlink, are we going to wait another 20 years for them to get that to the level that fiber is? The second is, and this is maybe just my imagination going wild, but I think about our landfills and how much we have worked. I grew up in the 80s and we recycled. You learned all about that and saving the landfills. What is space going to look like once these satellites just go off into orbit? Granted, we see space as this infinite thing, which it is, but do we want to do that? Is that something that we should do in the practices? So again, that's perhaps my imagination going off into a different tangent, but I think it's something to consider, the space junk out there.
Commissioner Nissen.
This isn't a question, it's more of a follow-up on what Commissioner Emdek had to say about waiting for 10 years for the 10-row silage chopper. Some of the proposals, LTD comes to mind, where they've got up to 6 years to get it done, and TDS was making the same promises in 2017, and they still haven't completed their work in a lot of our area.
Right.
So it's more of a comment that people really have figured out now how important it is to have broadband. And I don't think they're going to be willing to wait that long. And it's so important, especially in, Roger and I both have rural, difficult areas to get, wireless to because of the terrain and so forth. And so it's critical for our districts. And I know Dwayne has got a lot of more level ground out there, but I think there's also concern in your area as well. So,
Commissioner Gardner and then Commissioner Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Michelle, how have some of these other rural counties to the west that you mentioned, how have they been able to provide broadband where some of us have not been able to do that? And following it up to that, what's been the level of public funding by those counties? What's been their involvement?
So what I can tell you is the counties to the west, specifically Stevens, Lac Pearl, Big Stone, and Swift County, which is where the project we're working on is kind of pushing through from, they had vision and leadership. And that is really the best way I can explain it. They had the vision years ago that this is something that could work, and let's do it. And as far as what their public input is, do you know that, Connie? How much the other counties put in? I don't know the answer off the top of my head. That is something that we could likely find out if you're interested in it.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, Connie will have some more information.
We'll wait for that.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Anderson and then Commissioner Emdek.
Okay, yeah, I'm just speaking as far as satellite. I had that type of technology. I had 2 different systems over the years, and it worked. It was the best system I could get at the time. But the problem would be like if you had like a snowstorm in the wintertime, your satellite dish would be full of snow, and then you couldn't get reception, and you either had to climb up on the roof to brush it off, or which wasn't always the safest type of thing. The other thing would be like a bad rainstorm, and then you were out. And then the thing with satellite technology, it's fine, but by the time they put it on a rocket and get it up into space, that could already be old technology, in my opinion, or my experience from it. And then you're always going to get a delay with satellite type of reception, because it has a long ways to go to get up to space to get to that satellite, and it has to go right back down to Earth to get to wherever it's going, and then to come back, it's got to do the same process. So it's only going to be so fast. You'll never get the best. My other comment would be the gold standard, as everybody's been saying, is fiber optic. So in many ways, why invest in other systems? And when you're going to be going through like I did with 2 different satellite systems, and then now I'm on Vibrant, which is I think it's I go to a tower, it's line of sight to a tower, and then from there it's fiber optic. So I've been really happy with that. It would be nice to have fiber optic, but I'm in such a rural area, I don't know when that's going to happen. That might be 20 years, but if they come into the area with a tower for now, they come to that area with fiber optic, and then maybe I'm hoping, say 20 years down the road, they can eventually come to every household with fiber optic. So, and then as far as going out west, I don't know, was that dual telephone that you were under, or?
No, federated.
Okay. My uncle, he was CEO or whatever of a dual telephone company out in South Dakota. It's like Clear Lake, South Dakota, and his vision was every year they would put in a certain number of miles of fiber optic, and this was maybe 30 years ago. So these companies really got to look forward into the future, I think, and try to update things and get us to where we need to be, so we can get businesses out here that want to start up here. And young people, when they graduate from high school, like in my area, they want that stuff, and then they go off to college, and they see how it is, like in, say, a metro area, how fast things are and stuff, and they don't want to come back because they're going, well, then I'm going to this slower stuff, and they just don't want to deal with it, and they'll move into the places with the high-speed internet. So.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Emdek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just reply to Commissioner Gardner's question about why the western counties. A big part of the reason why Kandiyohi County is struggling is because providers came in and took the lowest hanging fruit of the cities of Wilmer, New London, and Spicer particularly. They could get a lot of services in a fairly small geography, so they got economies of scale. And as you get further out where the homes are more scattered, there wasn't as good a return. And so we really were hurt by the fact that we were already served. If we hadn't had any service in the county, these guys would be flooding the county saying, choose me, choose me, choose me, because, you know, they'd be able to pick up these towns and more densely populated areas too. So in Swift County, for example, besides Benson, there might not have been anybody that was really covering the area, so.
Yep, and I would add that Federated Telephone is, of course, out of Chicago, and they are a cooperative. So they had some leadership that was willing to take a chance. And that's where it all started, was in that Chicago, Alberta area, and then moved on with it. So as the internet became more and more popular, I remember the days when it was a fad.
Yeah.
And it was going away. So, yeah, I guess my last comments would just be that, you know, every technology has a place. For example, the wireless, it's served us really well, especially through the pandemic, getting people through. But a comment I made a few years ago when Tina Smith was our lieutenant governor, she had come out for a meeting, and my comment to the room was, why should we settle for good enough? Kandiyohi County is a great county. It has a lot of wonderful things going on, and we should get the best. We should have the gold standard here.
Well, thank you very much. I do think we have the vision here for some time that we want this. It's a matter of how do we get that to that point, and it's so complicated from county to county. And Mr. Kleindahl is a good point you brought up about bonding for that, but that has its downsides as well. And I think we have to look at all these different options, how to fund this. And it's really complicated, and everybody's got to have some skin in the game, you know. And you talk about the property values go up, you know, but we can't dump it all on the property owners, neither, or all on the townships. Each township has got unique funding. You know, smaller townships, they don't have the dollars a bigger township would have, as well as the county. And we want to try to be fair and provide the services across our whole county, but bring up really good questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm just going to read this briefly from somebody who has one of these technologies, DSL, in fact, a fairly good DSL plan. This person writes, during the pandemic, we have found how terribly inadequate the current internet access is at our home. For instance, we dropped our internet service through our telephone company due to slow and unreliable service that was very expensive. After that, we had internet through a hotspot on our cell phone. This allowed internet access, but it was only on one phone, so that person had to be home at all times. Since the pandemic, our service has gotten slower. Our current internet access is unreliable. There have been many times that trying to connect with our church service online and professional Zoom meetings, which were not successful. So we need better broadband in the areas where they have these technologies that Michelle was talking about. The state defines broadband. So when we talk broadband, some of that isn't even really broadband. Real broadband, as a part of the 2015 Broadband Progress Report, the Federal Communications Commission has voted to change the definition of broadband. So federal used to be a lot lower to call it broadband than state, but now they have matched up the state Minnesota. And a minimum download speed is 25 megabytes per second, and the minimum upload speed of 3 megabytes per second. And on the map that Larry showed earlier, the unserved areas are less than 25/3. The real goal for broadband today in the Minnesota State Broadband grants is 100/20, and that's the goal for 2026, but that's what they're looking at in applications today. So 100/20. So in this area, the purple areas are underserved. They do not have 100/20, but they might have 25/3. The red areas don't even have 25/3. This map shows you the areas in the state of Minnesota that are yellow do have 100/20 or greater. The areas that are white do not. So you can see that if you can look real closely, Wilmer, Spicer, and New London, like you had said, do have the 100/20. What we really want to see is a gigabyte. Fiber gives you a gigabyte, 1,000/1,000 symmetrical. We have some challenges. I'm going to skip over the LTD part because I think there's going to be a lot of discussion there, but we'll come back to that. These are, well, the challenges again are current providers. This is what we have in our areas. We have Charter and MediaCom, who do provide some cable service and do have some areas with fiber. Our DSL service providers are TDS, CenturyLink, Frontier, or wireless or MVTV wireless, and LTD at this time. Satellite includes HughesNet. I believe there's some others. Cell phone hotspots can be accessed through Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and Sprint. These incumbent providers are currently not doing anything in addition because of American recovery funds. They don't know what's going to happen there. The cost right now, the lack of access to fiber lines, there's different reasons. But I've called many of them and asked them if they would do more projects and increase their speed, and I'm not getting any positive responses. This is the LTD area. We are currently working on a township project. When I talked to you last, it was going to be Dover, Mamre, and St. John's Township. When Federated looked at the project and the cost and saw what LTD might do to that area, they decided they did want to pull Arctander Township in. We've had discussions with all 4 townships. They are all working together to match up how they want to do this project within their townships, which is wonderful to see that teamwork working together, who they want to assess and how they're going to get charged. They're all going to get charged per resident equally. So the townships aren't saying, no, I want mine to get charged less and mine more. That's not happening. They're going to be equal. It's great working with them. The cost of this project to do fiber to the premise is $6,818,000. If we include the LTD areas, and that's a big question now, do we include what LTD says they're going to do, or do we not include them? The state is even asking that question. Should we allow our projects to include LTD areas, or shouldn't we? The current ruling from the federal government is you can't. They're getting federal money to do those areas, so we can't include them in the state grant. We may do a grant and a project based on both at this point. If we include LTD areas, the cost is $7,626,000. 79% is infrastructure. Without LTD, it's 596 locations. That includes 247 in Arctander, 133 in Dover, 152 in Mamre, and 64 in St. John's. You can see below that the amount of spots it is if LTD areas are included. We have to secure the funds. We're working on that. We're working big time. You guys have already helped with a commitment of $25,000 per township. Thank you. The townships do need to bond. In order to do that, they have to either do the entire township or they have to select special districts. They've already had discussions with attorneys and accountants on how to go about that. They're plugged in. We talked about how they'll pay for that. I've continually told them that would be their expense to pay for the attorneys, the agreements that are drawn up, and the accountant fees. They now have American Rescue funds, and it's going to come close to the same amount what that's going to cost. So they have a new pot of money, and they're elated about that.
Just to clarify then, you said they want to bond for their share, and they're committed to that then?
They're committed to the bonding, yes. That was, Kevin came out from Federated Telephone Company, wanted to see their commitment limit, talked to them about that, and they all agreed, yes, we want to move forward, we will bond. Or we'll figure out other ways to fund it, but all of them said they'll bond.
And that'll be what kind of impact on their levy when they do that?
I'll show you.
Okay, I'm jumping ahead of you, thank you.
We'll also seek a grant application from the Minnesota Office of Broadband Development. In fact, the project is dependent on that. We do have to get a state grant. Things are changing there too, so I'll talk about that. So our expectations for the 596 locations, if we did a border grant and asked for 25% of the cost in, because over time, once the return on investment is made, they'll make money on this project. They have made it clear, and I believe as a co-op, their number one motive is to serve our communities, to get people broadband. But in the end, they at least want to break even and then make money. The people on their lines can eventually become cooperative members, but not until that return on investment is acquired. 25,000 with all, this is a sum, 43 cents a year for 10 years. Or in total, over 10 years, that's $326.4 a year. It doesn't sound a lot, but when you add $325 onto your property taxes every year for 10 years, it's a lot of money. If they were to divide that out by month, it'd be $27.20 per month. Plus, they have to pay for their services once they get them. Having money at the state level for border-to-border grants is dependent on a few things. First, the legislative action has to take place to allocate those funds. They're currently, and Michelle, this is dropped even from the other day. This is yesterday. And they are looking at American Rescue funds. They are looking at what's happening all over and saying, maybe we don't need to put so much money in the pot at the legislative session. We are still fighting that. We have our Rural Broadband Coalition that says, wait a minute. The funds came in because of the pandemic, so now why do we want to pull back what we've already done to get broadband across the state of Minnesota? But currently, our Senate is saying they want to see $40 million in the budget for the first year only. House DFL is saying $30 million for the biennial, which will only be $15 million a year. And the Governor Walz is saying $50 million. He had been talking $120 million earlier for the biennium. The process to apply for these grants is competitive. We have to have the best project ever. There's 120 possible points, and it's based on several factors. And I'll summarize this, but you can see where the points come in. Are we doing unserved and underserved areas and doing passages for everybody underserved? Putting in. Do we have financial commitment from our community partners, from the county, from the township, from maybe some businesses, and do we have letters of support? Are people saying they want this and need this? Are they showing me that in their letters? Do we know, and this would go back to our provider, Federated at this time, are they knowledgeable about their project? Is it completely shovel-ready? Are they prepared to build it, implement it, and operate the project? And do they have the experience and the capacity to do that? Our sustainability, will they keep that line up, that fiber line up after it's been put in? Economic development, demonstrated economic development and community enhancement potential. What is the potential for economic development in that area? I'll tell you, we have a lot more businesses now because of the pandemic in that area than we had before. People from working from home. We have a lot of farmers who are dependent on broadband, high technical farmers in the area, irrigation systems, dairy barns, different things. And we do have some businesses, a couple are Roner's Auto Parts and Minnesota Trapline. They desperately need better upload speeds than they have now.
Connie, may I ask you to try to summarize this in about 2 minutes? And it's good we're digging into this, but
I will do that.
yeah. So,
This, in fact, I can keep this as my last screen. When we apply to the state of Minnesota, we are going to look at what happened last year. And according to the data last year, that's what the question you asked earlier about the costs of projects, other places. The average project that was funded last year, there are 39 of them, had 177 people in their project area. The average cost of their projects was $1,393,000, and you can see the range on there. Some of them were up to the $5 million point. On average, they asked for 38% of the funds to come from the state. 75% have a gigabyte or more in their projects of speeds. And the average cost per site to put the fiber in or the broadband in was $8,224. The one thing I have to say is we're going to have to ask for less this year than 45%, like we had talked about. In fact, this little screen right here talks about asking for 30%. And it matches up closer to what happened last year. And because of the American Recovery Funds, they're going to expect us to have more matching funds in our grant proposal.
Okay. We got time for maybe about 2 questions or 3. Anybody has a question at this point? Or
Well, I have a question.
please proceed,
We have,
Commissioner Nissen.
I guess part of the reason we're here is because of the American Rescue Plan, and we have a lot of dollars, but what are we going to do with them? And I kind of thought maybe that would be something we would discuss this morning, because it is critical that we try to accomplish what we Ken, and that, the timing on that is also, how much time do we really have to get a grant application together?
Yeah.
And we want to sweeten the pot a little bit with using, hopefully, some of that money that we're getting, not just for the four, I represent the 4 counties that are in this project, but I think we have to look outside to be fair and make sure we can maybe do set some other monies aside going forward for, I know Burbank and Roseville, probably, is that 2 of yours that are probably suffering a little bit too? And a couple miles out of New London, my
Yeah, I was gonna
son-in-law
say.
lives there, and he has terrible internet, so.
Very good point, Commissioner Nissen. I think we are going to have a follow-up session and really not wait real long. And Commissioner Endek-
That was what I was going to say, Mr. Chair, is that we received largely background here today and answered a few questions, but, you know, we haven't had the conversation about how we approach it.
Just one quick.
One quick, Commissioner Anderson.
I have one quick question. So if townships or people want to have, you know, high-speed internet, what do they have to do to request funding?
Yeah, these 4 townships were picked because we did a meeting in March with all the townships together, invited them to talk to us about a project if they wanted one. And we did that again this year, and we've had some townships respond, so we're going to start meeting with them already for the next project. This project, again, is dependent on whether there's funds for border to border at the state of Minnesota. I'm hoping there is. We'll have the application in by the end of August, beginning of September. We're prepared to do that. I just want to keep in mind in my letter to you that you got last Thursday, Vibrant Broadband and Hanson Communications are also looking at doing something because of the new funds that are coming in the cities. The city of Princeburg wants something really bad, and Vibrant is willing to look at our community. I have the map up right now, at what they're willing to do, which includes a little bit of Burbank Township.
Okay, well, we have to move on. I did put together a letter of support for applying for the border-to-border grant from the county commissioners, and pass this around, if you will, please sign. And
Wonderful.
Mr. Kleindahl, do you have any closing comments at this point? And thank you, Connie. I'm sorry we had to
You are
cut you
welcome.
short, but we have
Well,
another scheduled meeting we have
It took me 3 years to learn what I know
Okay.
today, and I still don't know it all.
Maybe that's probably all some of us can handle. Some of us
Yeah.
are very far ahead, and this is probably old news. They've been there already. So, but thank you for everybody's patience, and please proceed.
Mr. Chair, just to recap what Mr. Nissen was talking about, we want to lay the groundwork today. We have 2 of you and Roger are on the broadband committee, so you're a little bit ahead. I want to make sure, before we talk about the American Rescue Plan, and because we don't know how the details and what the rules are going to be for that, we can't talk about how we're going to spend those dollars until we have a basic understanding where everybody is at with broadband. So we put everybody at the same level now. And then as we get the rules and regulations and guidelines and how we're going to do what we can do at the American Rescue Plan, we're ready to go. So I appreciate your patience, and I assure you we'll keep this on the fast track.
Okay. Thank you very much, and I hereby adjourn the Kandiyohi County Board of Commissioners work session.